dive. Our first session is going to be a deep dive. We're going all the way in, and we're going to be in really good hands with our presenters, Kyrié Carpenter and Ryan Backer, who are facilitators of this Let's Dismantle Ageism workshop and co-founders of Old School, which is an anti-ageism clearinghouse, an organization that curates, creates, commissions, and disseminates free resources to educate people about ageism and how to end it. Old School also hosts and facilitates spaces where age advocates around the world can connect. Old School collaborates with other pro-aging organizations, and Old School shows up for other social justice movements. I want to plug I think it's weekly office hours that Old School offers, I believe on Wednesdays, but Kyrié and Ryan can correct me. If you are not aware of this, it's such an excellent resource to dial in and talk with Kyrié and Ryan and other colleagues about questions, challenges, opportunities, successes that you're having related to your work in creative aging or working with older adults in general. And with that, Kyrié and Ryan, I'm so glad that you're with us today, and I'm excited to get started. Over to you.
All right, Susan, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. We are so happy to be here with you as well. As Susan mentioned, we're the co-founders of oldschool.info. And I just want to do a bit of a shout out because we have all these resources that help dismantle ageism, and so many of them are not arts-based. And that is a big gap in the resources to fight ageism. So I just want to tell you how grateful we are to be here with you all, dropping into creativity and really exploring ageism through this creative lens, because if we really are going to create a world without ageism, it's going to take a lot of creativity. And Ryan and I both in our personal lives have deep connections to the transformational power of both arts and creative expression. So I just want to let you know, we are so happy to be here with you today. And I love the reflection you started us, with Susan too. And it just got me thinking about, I'm just so curious to see what emerges as we do this workshop with this unique group. That's one of the things I love about facilitating most, is that we really get to have that feedback loop with the people that we're spending time with, and new things get generated every time we engage with this material. So very happy to be here with you today. We are going to be doing the workshop called Let's Dismantle Ageism. And also just want to let you know that it is part of a DIY kit. So this whole workshop you're going to experience today, if you have a group of folks that you want to walk through the same material, we have a big open source ethos at Old School. So the deck, the script, the handout, which hopefully you got ahead of time, but we'll put links to in the chat, are all available for free on oldschool.info. And we really encourage people to take it and run with it, make it your own. Let us know if you do it, just because that's fun for us to know. Give us any feedback, but just want to give you that little bit of heads up before we dive in. And with that, I'm going to get our deck sharing. So make sure you have your screen set up how you like it. I know my favorite is to do gallery view so I can see everyone else's faces. And if you can have your camera on, if you're in a space where you can do that, please do so. It helps us to feel sort of like we're together in person and just be able to pick up a bit more intuitively on how folks are doing, if they're engaged and whatnot. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Ryan to get us started.
Thanks so much, Kyrié, and thanks so much, Susan, for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here with you all today. So the title of this presentation is called Let's Dismantle Ageism. So first, we need to define what ageism is exactly. Ageism is prejudice against a person or persons due to their chronological age, just as racism and sexism are prejudices against persons due to the color of their skin or their gender. Ageism exists against older people as well as against younger people, people in the middle, and like these other prejudices, they rarely exist by themselves. So we often see multiple isms such as racism, sexism, ageism, and ableism affecting a single person. And this is what we call intersectionality, which is a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. So in her TED Talk, which you might have seen, Ashton Applewhite asked us to join her movement to end ageism, to join a movement to end ageism. As Simon Sinek reminds us, in order for us to do that, we have to make this cause our own. That's what we're here for today, to help you make this cause personal. So for me personally, I first understood what ageism actually is way after I experienced it and way after I was a perpetrator of it, actually. So I went back to school for gerontology, which is the study of aging. And when I was there, I learned about the term ageism. And the reason why I went to school for gerontology was sort of a bit paternalistic. It was because I wanted to, quote, help older people. And when I learned about ageism, I realized that it's not so much about younger people helping older people, but it's more about solidarity across the ages. And really what prevents this solidarity is ageism in both directions. And I'll invite Kyrié to share how she learned about ageism as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So my story with ageism starts when I was 22 and I went to the dermatologist. I grew up in Florida, so I have a lot of sun damage, was getting a mole check. And at 22, my dermatologist recommended preventative Botox. And within a few years, many of my friends were doing just that, to ward off the dreaded arrival of wrinkles. Thankfully, I would say, due to a childhood filled with a lot of illness and a lot of doctors, I was really wary of anything that meant more needles and doctors and procedures. And serendipitously, I came across the Israeli artist Noah Zilberman's jewelry, which she made from her wrinkles. She actually cast her wrinkles and made these beautiful like headdresses out of her forehead wrinkles and, a necklace out of sort of like the cleavage wrinkles. And it really got me wondering, why could these pieces of jewelry be considered beautiful and the lines on my face were considered ugly? And that was sort of my first internal wake-up call to it. I, after that went on to study psychology and did my clinical training as a therapist working in long-term care and became really aware of, the deadly intersection of ageism and ableism, particularly as it applies to folks living with dementia. And then moved out of direct client work into advocacy work that you see me doing here today. And so sort of been on this quest. I now also make a practice of sometimes gilding my own wrinkles. And I would encourage you all, if that sounds fun to you, to join me of grabbing some gold eyeliner and accentuating them. And it is really amazing how, we really construct what is beautiful. And again, so happy to be here with creative folks because I find art so powerful, and we can see really beautiful art of people of all ages, and we can recognize that art is beautiful. I think it goes a long way of helping us see people of all ages as beautiful. So happy to be with you here today. I also realized we did not mention our third co-founder is Ashton Applewhite, so that's why we were mentioning her TED Talk, so you get to hear from all three of us on the old school team. All right, so in order to change something as big as societal culture, which is what we're really talking about here, we have to start with first changing ourselves. That's why Ryan and I started with our stories of how we personally became, aware of ageism, both in ourselves. And in order to change ourselves, we have to look really deeply within. We have to be super honest, which is why I was so happy for Susan's reflection at the beginning of this. We could come into, a gentle space with ourselves. To look and be honest, but also be kind. Self-awareness is really the first step in making the change around ageism, and any sort of change around different social justice issues. So just want to get a sense of, take a little bit of a reflection to, maybe just by show of virtual or physical hand, how many of you would consider our culture to be ageist? Okay, it looks like some of you do, yeah, some of you don't. And how many of you think that you're ageist yourself? How many of you would consider yourself ageist? A few less, maybe like, yeah, we're not quite sure. Great, so we are gonna just do a little bit of, we're gonna go to the chat and do a little bit of reflection to explore that question a bit more. So I'll put the questions up here. So just go ahead and we'll start with the first one there in the chat. What is the last thing that you said or thought you were too old for? Don't mind, just go ahead and put it in the chat. What was the last, just think back. What was the last thing you said or thought you were too old for? Skiing, a bikini, an outfit, running a half marathon, having another baby, canvassing, short dresses, laser tag, changing jobs, certain kinds of clothes, creating a hotline, learning to roller skate cartwheels.
Going back to school, leather jacket, staying out all night, riding a scooter. These are great. Traveling alone.
These are, so I just want you all to just know some things. So these are all things that folks are saying they're too old for. Okay, now how about let's flip that. What was the last thing you said or thought you were too young for?
I relate a lot to eating dinner at 5.
Interesting to the synchronous around retirement. As Susan mentioned, office hours, the weekly Ask Anything that we host, retirement has been coming up a lot in the past couple of weeks too, just the concept of it, what to do about it, feelings around it. We actually had one member get gently nudged to retire. So we've all been kind of holding space for that. Bifocals, staying in, going to bed. Yeah, I love the themes, like, so staying in, going to bed at a certain time, knee pain, hearing aids, retirement. Yeah, lots about retirement and bedtimes. Great, these are awesome. Okay, so just look at this chat too and think about how easy that was to come up with things we've already said we were too old or too young for. And finally, what would you say the biggest misconception people have about you based on your age is? I know one that Ryan and I share, which is, now I've been doing this work for about a decade, so it's starting to happen less and less, but usually the first question at Q&A is, why does someone your age care about this? So one of the biggest misconceptions I have is that younger people don't care about ageism. That you can't keep up, that you're not capable of certain things, that you won't get a joke, not open to new experiences. Yeah, these are great. Please read if you have it together, you have all the answers, that you've had an easy life, that you need help with everything. People sometimes think I'm 20 years younger than I am. Yeah, I did get asked once. I was doing a workshop on a college campus, and someone asked me, "Are you a sophomore?" And I was like, so interesting, not student, but like sophomore. Like, wow, like you specifically think I'm a really certain age that I'm not. Okay, these are great. So I just want to go back to that definition of ageism that Ryan told us at the beginning, that it's, any of these, ideas that we hold about someone, prejudices, stereotypes, due to their chronological age. And look at all these ideas that people have about us because of our age, and all of these ideas of things that we are too young or too old for, all based on our age. So when we go back to that question I asked you at the beginning, is our culture ageist? Well, this last third question shows us that it is. If people have misconceptions about us based on our age, that is showing a bias, an assumption based on our age. That is ageism. And also all of those first two, anytime we say we're too young or too old for something, it turns out that we might be all ageist. But Ryan, what's the good news about that?
Well, the good news is that we all fall somewhere along a continuum of awareness about this. So take a moment to think about where your journey with being aware of ageism might be right now. So before this workshop, maybe you had an idea of what ageism was. Maybe during this workshop, you'll move a little bit more towards the right. But it's good to just understand where we're all at and understand that it is a continuum and that we're never, none of us are ever all perfect anti-ageists. Kyrié and I fall along here as well. We're not ever going to get to the right. It's a journey. And the fact is, ageism affects us all because we are all ageist, because society is ageist. It affects every one of us. And we're going to now explore how exactly it affects us, because it starts really young, really early. So Disney is a great example of mainstream media that we're exposed to from a very young age. There was a study done that looked at 93 older characters from Disney movies over a 70-year period. 53% of those characters were portrayed as grumpy, evil, sinister, helpless, or sad. 71% of the movies had at least one negative portrayal of an older character. And it's interesting to note that older male characters in primary roles were usually figures of authority, so clergy, etc. So it shows you a little bit about gendered ageism as well. Even kids' games and toys perpetuate ageism. So we're all familiar with this game, which I played a lot as a kid. And then add in the billboards that we see, the greeting cards that bash getting old, the magazine ads. It's a constant barrage of ageism. Unfortunately, until we reach a level of awareness, we can become immune to these constant attacks and literally buy into the fact that it's okay to make fun of people as they age. And aging is really all advertisements like these really stress that aging is all about loss and decline. So after years of experiencing all this ageism, we internalize it and we actually believe it. So I'd love for this, if you haven't guessed already, this workshop is going to be very interactive. So thanks so much to the folks who have their cameras on, and I'll invite anyone who wants to turn their camera on as well to feel free. And I'm going to crowdsource some answers right now. So I'd love for you all, or one of you at least, to come off mute and explain what is ageist about one of these advertisements that you see. And if you're having a hard time reading one of them, I can read it for you. Don't be shy. It's very interactive. You're going to be coming off mute again after this, so.
The ladies drinking the tea.
Go ahead. Is that Tamara?
Yes.
Okay, so the ladies drinking the tea. Seen enough old bags? Try a new face. Trebbiano handbags. So do you want to explain what's ageist about this?
Well, all the women are, drinking tea. They have the hats on, the old grandma dresses. So it's kind of like gearing towards older people that, we assume grandmas.
Yeah, exactly. And old bags is essentially a derogatory
Is grandma. Mm-hmm.
I think it might be more of a derogatory British term for older people, maybe, but it's still, yeah, it's quite derogatory. Anyone else?
The old bag you'll actually love. And then portraying an older woman's body implies that we should not and do not love older bodies, and particularly older women's bodies.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Kalia. That's exactly it. Yeah, I mean, you can see here too how gendered ageism is. The one on the top left, I actually took that picture. It's about a subway station in New York City that was renovated, and it says, at age 80, who doesn't need a facelift? Talking about an 80-year-old subway station. And I showed it to my friend and I said, this is so ageist. And she said, yeah, it's actually sexist too, because you know that they're not talking about men when they say who needs a facelift at 80. And then we have, of course, the okay boomer in the top right. And then, you know, the bottom left is a advertisement for lights, and it basically says that under regular lights you look very old, and under these fancy lights you look young. And it's implying that everyone wants to appear young, and that lights can do that for you, which, I mean, a lot of these just don't make any sense.
Can I make an observation?
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Okay, Ryan. Okay, I just went recently to my 50th high school reunion. So that puts me at 68, all right? Now, my impressions of the high school reunion was through my yearbook. I was in one mindset. I'm looking at the people that I was expecting to see. But once I saw them, all of a sudden, yes, there was a shock of age change. But after a while, it was almost like going back to just being with them as if you were back in high school, because it was the memories and what you're going to do and chances of what you're going to do in your future. So I think it's a matter of a gestalt. It's a matter of where your perception is at the time. And these pictures that you're putting up there, you know, throw us into a loop, but very easily we can come out of that loop. It's up to us how we want to do that. We don't have to be subservient to these images and how we perceive ourselves or perceive other people. Just a thought.
I love that, Alan. Thanks so much for coming off mute and explaining that. It's a great approach. And there's some really great comments in the chat, so I just encourage everyone to check the chat out, and I'll turn it over to Kyrié to continue.
Thanks. Yeah, you see me taking to the chat. Someone mentioned crone, which gets me all excited. I call myself a crone in training, working on reclaiming that word. And then I will say, yeah, the sandals are the OK Boomer Chacos, which I was very disappointed by because I was a big fan of wearing Chacos till they did that. I wrote them, they didn't write back. But yeah, it's crazy to think that, you know, caring for our planet is a single age issue. All right, so yes, thank you so much for that, Ryan. I also want to say, if you all come across something in the world, this is, again, all about raising our awareness. And sometimes, like Ryan said, they took the photo of the subway and sent it to a friend saying, isn't this ageist? And if you feel like you see something and you're like, you want to send it to a friend and ask if it's ageist, you can do that. Again, our colleague, Ashton Applewhite, has a blog called Yo, Is This Ageist? And it's a Tumblr where you can submit something you found out in the world, and she will write a very witty response telling you if it is or is not ageist. It's also a great place to just go and raise your own awareness. Ashton has a wonderful sense of humor, so the responses are quite amusing as well. So it's a fun thing to just scroll if you're on a boring Zoom. Don't scroll it right now. Hopefully we're not boring. And so that, I just want to highlight that for you. We're going to be giving you lots of resources to help continue this work after today.
So one of my favorite things to say is that aging equals living. Anti-aging is synonymous with death. But ironically, the very thing all of the anti-aging propaganda purports to avoid. So we need to stop allowing this to be our reality. And we need to help others understand that this doesn't have to be their reality either.
Right. So now just diving a little bit more, so I'm being so distracted by all the Chrome conversations in the chat. Like everyone, that is like such my jam. Let's go to that in the Q&A, have lots of fun resources there. But first, continuing to just sort of unpack and get our grounding here. We're thinking about all this messaging that we've been receiving, all these ads we saw, all the ideas we have about what we're too young, too old for, what other people have said. It's been coming in our entire lives. And what that means is that we're going to hold implicit bias about age. And implicit bias are automatic, unexamined thoughts. And oftentimes an implicit bias can run counter to a person's conscious beliefs without realizing it. For example, it is possible to express an explicit liking of a certain social group or approval of a certain action while simultaneously being biased against that group on an unconscious level. It's a really complicated way of saying, Ryan did a lovely job sharing this in their introduction of starting to study gerontology out of this like explicit, oh, I want to help older people, this almost like paternalized, benevolent ageism, but still held these internalized ageist beliefs, which as they said, Ryan and I both continue to hold them. So it's that these can run in parallel, which can be really confusing too. It makes it harder to unpack. So that's what implicit bias is. And then explicit bias, our biases were known, that we know we have, right? So I know I like peppermint ice cream more than chocolate ice cream. I am explicitly biased towards peppermint ice cream, and I'll say it. But it's really important to know that these biases can coexist and even be contradictory. So again, that's probably why many of you knew our culture was ageist, but may have not realized that yourself was ageist, because it's an implicit bias. Yeah, you might have explicit compassionate thoughts towards older people, yet hold implicit biases that are unintentional. And when they're unintentional and unknown, they can crop up without us knowing it and be really problematic when we aren't aware of them.
So language has a huge impact on how we see our own aging and the assumptions that we make about others due to their perceived age. And catastrophizing types of language is the worst. Mainstream media increasingly refers to the boomer generation entering elderhood as the silver tsunami. It should come as no surprise to anyone that at some point the baby boomers would grow old. So now it's termed as a devastating disaster and a crisis. This framing is very much ageist. Same with the victim narrative. It certainly doesn't help care partners to see themselves as the victim, burdened with caring for mom. Both of these examples show how language can pit the old against the young. And then, have you heard about the millennials ruining everything? This is also ageism. Maybe it's the millennials and Gen Z are ruining everything. It begs the question, why do we even label each other in generations? What is it with those buckets, and do they actually have any scientific backing? Spoiler alert, no. Does it connect us, or does it further divide us? So not only are the words we use important if we want to end ageism, but so is how we use them.
Think about how we use words. You'll all likely recognize who this is. Queen Elizabeth, who we just recently lost, but lived to be over 90 years old. So we're going to use her for our example here to sort of show what we mean by how you speak. So let's pretend that you were able to meet Queen Elizabeth and you had a chance to talk with her. I want you to just think about what you would say to her. Would you ask her what it was like to become queen at such a young age? Would you ask her thoughts on how the world has changed? I mean, just think about how much she witnessed as a leader. Or maybe your conversation would go like this. Oh, Queenie, sweetie, would you like some tea? Be careful, it's hot. Let's blow on it together first, shall we? And that's ridiculous, right? Hopefully you can all feel the ridiculousness of that, but of course we would never talk to Queen Elizabeth that way. And we share this because we believe that every person that we interact with deserves no less dignified treatment than we would have given to Queen Elizabeth. And obviously this is a bit of an exaggeration and I'm playing around with it, but after today, you will know elder speak when you hear it. It's when we get that high-pitched tone and we use endearing words like sweetie or honey instead of someone's name. Caveat, when you don't have the relationship to have an actual nickname or term of endearment with them. When we use slow, exaggerated speech, it's not an appropriate way to talk to an older person. And neither is controlling language when we talk louder and firmer with an authoritarian finality to it. Both of these types of language serve to infantilize older people who have lived really long, full lives. And it's one great way that we can help undo some of that, again, implicit bias that we have.
So we know that there is a lot of power behind the words we use. So let's flesh out our talk about language with an exercise. So we're gonna put on the screen a few different phrases and we're gonna go together and sort of crowdsource, you'll come off mute again, by telling us what is ageist about the statement, what's the intent of the statement, and how can it be reworded so that it is not an ageist statement. And from what I've heard from you all so far, and from what I see in the chat, I think we'll be able to do this activity together. So do we have anyone who's brave enough to come off chat and explain why this is an ageist statement? Or exactly what is ageist about this statement?
I'll go.
Okay, go ahead, Tina.
I'm having a senior moment. It is implying that only seniors have lapses in memory or forgetful moments, or they forget why they came in a room. And I can attest to that. That is not true.
Exactly. And do you want to say maybe what the intent of the statement was? Like, what would someone who says this actually be saying or trying to say?
Bear with me. I'm trying to get my thoughts together.
Perfect. And that's the answer to both questions, right? So that's how it can be reworded, and that's really the intent of the statement is just I forgot, right? That's great. Thanks so much, Tina.
All right, we got another one for you. So we sort of, spoiler alert, we kind of did this one a little bit earlier, but so saying I'm too young or I'm too old for that. Can someone come off mute and help us out with this one? What's ageist about this?
Saying that you can't do something because of your age, period. I mean, if you're too young, and there's so many people that have been like, I saw a boxer woman that was like 80 years old, winning championships. I mean, so you cannot really identify age with certain activities because there is no limit to, only you put your limit to yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. Outside of a few outliers about, things we need to be consenting adults to do, like there really are very, very few things that we are truly too young or too old, for. Absolutely. So what do I remember even in the beginning too, a lot of people mentioned starting families or expanding families too. And like, sure, even biologically, you might be too old for that, but that doesn't mean that you can't be a parent. Biology doesn't dictate parenthood too. So even things like that, like I'm too old to, have another kid doesn't, even those can be ageist there too. So yeah, outside there are a few, externalities here. Okay. So Tamara, what do you think is the intent of the statement? Why do we say I'm too young or too old for these things?
Can I offer something here? I think this is an attitude statement. Why am I saying that? Well, as we get older, does it really matter what people think? I mean, when you ask people in their age on the lifespan, maybe when you're younger, you're more concerned with how you're being perceived by others. But when you're getting older, possibly just because of your age, you earn a little bit more respect because it already entails that your age gives you that opportunity to be able to express the way you would like to be expressed. So I'm giving it a positive spin on this one. But I think it's operative. And it also depends on your personality. If your personality is one who isn't so concerned about how you're being perceived by others, well, then you're in an advantage and you can share that with others.
Alan, absolutely, that would be part of it. I think where that can get problematic is there are definitely structural implications to ageism. So I know, particularly speaking from the female experience of aging, a lot of women talk about, there's a big invisibility that comes for women as we get older. And there are women who are embracing that invisibility and being like, fine, if I'm going to be invisible, then I'm going to get to do all the things that the world said I wasn't allowed to do as a younger woman. And I think that's a great example of sort of making lemonade, if you will, out of some ageist lemons. But yeah, I think it's important to think both about our internal experience and who we are. So I just want to get back. We will definitely have lots of fun discussion in the Q&A. So Tamara, back to you. What do you think the intent of? Why do you think we say we're too young or too old for something?
I think we're making excuses for ourselves. And it could be that they have like for instance, like I had a car accident. So when I was in my 50s, I was able to do so much. and I was into fitness and healthy, and then I got hit by a car, and so then now I can't do all those things. Right. And so, you know, I won't explain to everybody, oh my gosh, I had this accident and this and that. I'll just probably say, oh no, I'm too old for that now. You know.
Exactly. It's a placeholder, so it's like right? Yeah, it's a placeholder for like, oh, you know, I'm not able to do that anymore. That hurts to do that. Frequently it's I'm too smart to do that now. You know, or even to Alan's point too, like, I don't care about what people think anymore. Like, you know, and so I guess so how would we reword these statements then so that the intent was clear and they weren't ageist? What do you think?
Maybe saying I'll try that in the future, or I don't feel good right now doing this, but you know, I'll give it a go maybe next time.
Exactly. Just say what we actually mean, right? Like say like I don't feel like doing that right now. I don't want to do that. Like I'm too smart to do that. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. All right, Ryan's got one more for us.
Yeah, I like Kelly's response. That's not my thing. That's, you know, no is a complete sentence. That's great. So you'll understand when you are older. I can tell from the chat that people are very aware of ageism against younger people. So what is ageist about this statement? Marta, are you talking to us? Because you're on mute. No, okay.
I was not, but this one is really one that I usually listen a lot. You'll understand when you're older. That implies that you are not as intelligent just because you're not old enough. That's very bad.
Exactly. And what do you think they're trying to say when someone says this? What do you think they're really trying to say?
That they lack understanding.
Okay. And do you have an idea of how it can be reworded?
You'll figure it out. I don't know. I'm not sure.
It's tough, right? It's a weird overlap because, you know, it's kind of assuming that a younger person hasn't had lived experience enough to inform whatever it is they're going through, but they very well may have, or another way to say it is just, you know, you're living through a different time and you may be able to understand this. Let me try and see, you know, like, let's try to see if you could comprehend this instead of assuming that someone is unable to understand. You know, there's some things we have similar lived experiences and other things we don't. So it's really a matter of who it is and what time we're living through. So then there are the compliments, like when people say young lady or young man to older people than them, to people older than them. And we know that most people don't mean harm when they say some of these things, but letting these comments pass actually helps to perpetuate ageism. So we're going to go through how we can respond to these so-called compliments without being smug or sassy. And thanks so much, Mark. I forgot to thank you for answering my questions, even though you might not have been talking to us.
I'm gonna have to pour over the chat when this is over. There's so much good stuff I keep seeing over there. This is a great group. All right, so Ryan and I are gonna role play some strategies for responding to the compliments. And as Ryan said, we recognize that the intent frequently, with the phrases we just shared and these compliments, the intent is not to be harmful or to be hurtful, but both intent and impact matter. And the impact is that they perpetuate ageism. So that's why we're working on untangling them. So we're going to role play a little bit, and then we're going to put you all into breakout rooms, and you're going to get to role play with each other. So we'll sort of demo first, and then you'll have a couple minutes to play with these for yourself. So the first way that we can respond to an ageist compliment is by responding in kind. So just repeating the compliment back to them. So for example, I said, Ryan, you look so great for your age.
You look great for your age too, Kyrié.
Kind of puts it back on the other person, and they're like, wait. And when you feel it said to yourself, you can sort of feel that it doesn't feel quite right. Like, what does that even mean? I will say I actually had this happen to me for the first time. Just quick anecdote, was watching a movie. I have a small, 7-month-old, and I have an au pair who happens to be 19. And we were watching a movie, and it said like the ages of characters and little descriptors about them when they popped up, like this is so and so. And for the mom in the movie, it popped up and said like so and so's 36, and then things about her, which happens to be how old I am. And my au pair goes, "Wow, she looks good for 36." I go, "Emily, what do you think 36 looks like?" And it was a really funny, and then we were able to have a conversation about like, what does she mean by that? How about she just looks good? So that's a really great way to just respond in kind. All right. So second, we can answer with pride about the thing that they're trying to compliment. So if I said, "Man, Ryan, you look great. You don't look a day over 30.
And I can respond, "Well, I was born in 1988 and I'm proud of that."
Or even like when this is what 36 looks like is a good way to respond to that too. All right, and the last one you can do is, and this is the one I actually tend to do most because I'm not that great at thinking on my feet and being funny and quippy, is just with a really genuine look of puzzlement. So again, not sassy, not smug, genuine curiosity, asking what someone means. And this throws the burden of understanding about how the remark is ageist back on the person. So if I said to Ryan, "You're 34, you're still a baby."
What do you mean?
And then I have to wonder what do I mean by "you're still a baby"? All right, so we are going to give you all 5 minutes to practice responding to ageist comments. You're going to be put into rooms of 3. We do this because we found out on Zoom that frequently somebody's camera isn't working or microphone isn't working. So we're going to give you rooms of 3 versus pairing you up, just in the hopes that everyone at least gets one other person to actually interact with. So just sort of go around the Zoom room. I'll say, just to streamline it, go alphabetical order by the first letter of whatever your Zoom name is. So whoever comes first in the alphabet, they say an ageist compliment to whoever comes second. And then they get a chance responding in any of these 3 ways you feel comfortable. And then just keep kind of rotating the room around that. Ryan has put compliments in the chat for you to work with. They are also all on the handout that there's a link to in the chat, and hopefully you got ahead of time. Feel free also, if there's one that you've gotten that annoys you, feel free to use that. Also let us know, we'll add it to the list. And final remark is that if for some reason you do not feel comfortable going to a breakout room, law of 2 feet, you do not have to. You're welcome to just, reflect on these on your own and stay out of the room. So totally consent to the breakout room. You don't have to go do that if it doesn't feel right. But we hope you do because it's really fun. Any clarifying questions before I ask Tiffany to send you away? Great, go ahead and open the breakout rooms for them then.
Is everybody able to join? If you're having trouble, just chime in.
Susan, I haven't joined. Do you want me to join my group? Are there only 2 people?
Let me see where you are, Ryan.
Hi, I landed in a room that it appeared the other person was not there.
Okay.
Like there was another person, but it was
gotcha.
They didn't respond to me. So
okay. Ryan, yes, please. And I'm gonna do a little bit of switching over here on the back end.
Okay, I'll join now.
Great.
Okay. Susan, do you want my help sort of wrangling breakout rooms? I see, yeah, that like it looks like Allison and Simone were alone. Why don't we, Allison and Simone, put you together?
Can you add Erin to that one as well, since she was kicked out, since you're doing, put them all in one?
Yeah, I'm trying to find.
This is Heather. I think Dahlia and I were also in alone in a breakout room.
Yes. Okay, well, if there's two of you together, then you can practice if you're in person together.
No, we were in our own separate rooms.
Oh, got it. Okay, Galia and Heather. Okay. Do you remember what room you were in? No. Okay, sorry. Here, I see Galia.
You can add them both to 22.
Okay, move to 22. Galia, you're going to 22. I'm going to try to find Heather here. Okay. There's Heather, moving her to 22 as well.
Hello. My computer shut down on me, so I was trying to go to room 11.
Okay, who? Oh wait, got it. Moving you there now. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else need help?
Yeah, this is Cheryl Gilliland. I was in a breakout room, but it was just by myself.
Cheryl, say your last name again. Sorry.
It's Gilliland with a G.
And I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing. Could you repeat that?
Gilliland with a G. It's G-I. Oh, here I am getting it.
I just moved her.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Anyone else need help? Allison, I just saw your chat. Sounds like you didn't get a breakout room.
I just moved her to 1.
Oh, thank you. So it sounds like Kyrié, 1 more minute warning now we should give them.
I think so.
Okay.
Doesn't take that.
Tiffany,
and I think we actually might be able to wrap a little sooner, which I think will be great to give more time for the Q&A, because it sounds like there's a lot of rich discussion happening. So is that okay with you if I do our little break a little bit sooner, or?
Yeah,
no?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Seems like it's going to be a pretty rich Q&A.
Okay. And just let me know, what time do you want to do the break? Like around 2? Right now I have 2:45.
Yes. Let's see. So right now it's 2:08. Like, let's say like in like 20 minutes or so.
Sure.
Great.
What time do you want to close the rooms?
I go ahead and give them close them with the 1 minute warning now.
Okay.
think we're back.
We were in the middle of a sentence and then we just got kicked out.
Oh, Zoom. It's the worst.
Yes.
No control at all.
Leslie, I want to, we have French allies who do old school. I want to somehow connect you with we have French speaking old school events that some French allies put on and are, but yeah, it's a very different, ageism is very different over there. It's a really interesting conversation that we have a lot of fun being in. Maybe I'm trying to think of, Ryan, the best way to connect Leslie with the FUFA people.
Maybe the email address? I'm not sure.
Yeah, if you're interested in getting connected into the French anti-ageism world, direct message Ryan or I and we'll connect you via email. Yeah, just give us your email address. Yeah.
Je prends le français maintenant. Parce que j'habite à Montréal, Quebec. Donc, yeah, it's really important to do this work in all languages.
Mm-hmm. All right, awesome. Well, I want to get us to finish up and get to our Q&A as quick as possible because I'm so curious to hear from you all just based on the chat. We've got some really amazing minds in here that I can't wait to learn from. But I would love to just hear from one person. How was that for you responding to those ageist compliments for those of you that didn't have tech issues and were able to get in rooms and practice? And for those of you that did have tech issues, I suggest practicing at home with a friend or loved one.
Well, my impression with our session was it was a little awkward because you wanted to say something, but you didn't want to insult somebody. And I was operating on both avenues. And then when Allison came in late, it was very hard to kind of say something so that I wouldn't say something that would be upsetting to her because she came late. That's just my thought.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it seems like in the chat too that, yeah, it brought, especially now that we've primed you, like all of this stuff is ageist and biased and isn't actually a compliment. We sort of primed you and then sent you off to practice insulting each other. It's a really good reflection, Alan. Well, hopefully it also gave you a little bit of, I don't know, if you're anything like me, these things happen in the moment and I normally freeze. And then at 3 a.m., I think of the perfect response. And so we do this practice so that, when we start practicing responding to these comments and compliments, then when it does happen in the moment, we can be more thoughtful, we can be more kind and know what to say. All right, with that, I'll turn it back over to Ryan.
I'm just finding the French.
Thank you.
Email.
Okay.
There we go. There's the email. If anyone wants to do any work or find out about the work that the French speakers are doing against ageism, please write them. And soon enough, we'll have an easier way. Maybe we'll have a presence on our site or something for that work.
That's in the works. This workshop's also in the works of getting translated into French.
Yes. So we've had the chance to take a brief look at how we got to this point in seeing our aging selves and others' aging selves with an unkind eye. And we've looked at how that has been compounded through institutional ageism, like the language that we use. So how do we move forward from here? So in her TED Talk, Ashton invited us to join her in the movement to end ageism.
But how do we do that? And the answer is we need to take action, because that's how we really change things, is through action. So we are going to brainstorm together actions that we can take. And then if you did have the handout downloaded, on the back side of it is a commitment form where you can actually fill out your actions. So grab that if you have it handy. If not, you can just use any kind of paper. So first, we're going to brainstorm together. We're going to think about all the things that we can start doing, stop doing, and keep doing. And if you need inspiration for this, again, encourage you to check out the Clearinghouse, oldschool.info, because there's tons of resources on there and ways to get started and jump in. I think we have, over 300 some resources at this point. Ryan, again, not created by us. We source these from all over. But first, we are going to brainstorm together. So fingers ready in the chat. let's just brainstorm. What are some things that we can keep doing to help put an end to ageism? So this is, think about things you're already doing. What can we, and this is just a brainstorm, and then we're all going to get to pick from the chat, things we can keep doing. Keep having fun, and keep attending workshops on anti-ageism. What else? Keep raising awareness. Watching our language. Yep, these are great. Yes. Yes, you can keep, doing all the creative aging stuff, Yep, having mixed age groups is super important. Owning your age. Perfect. All right, you can, if you're in the middle of typing something, it still works because we don't know what you've already done or not doing. But next, we're going to think about all of the things that we could stop doing to help put an end to ageism. So now in the chat, what will you stop doing to help put an end to ageism? Maybe you will stop saying thank you when someone gives you an ageist compliment. Maybe you could stop saying you're too young or old to do something. What can you stop doing? You can stop having, assumptions. Stop being afraid to call stuff out. Stop assuming. These are great. All right, I'll give about 15 more seconds for stop. I have one more. Stop using the word old. That's a really easy one. I guarantee you 99% of the time you use the word young or old, you actually mean something different. So stopping using the word old is really, or young is really easy. These are great. Okay. 10 more seconds to put your stops in. All right, and finally, let's just brainstorm what are things we can start doing to help put an end to ageism. One plug again, which I said earlier too, is the office hours that Susan mentioned that we host, which is a weekly Ask Anything about ageism. You can start coming to that. Yeah, absolutely. Having friends of all ages is a really great thing. James, we always say, like, pick something you like doing and then figure out how to do it with folks of all ages versus, that helps it to not feel contrived. Complaint to advertisers. Yep. Making sure ageism is included in DEIJ statements and actions. Yep. That's something that we're pretty passionate about too, because it is so intersectional. Yeah, Susan, start telling people your age when they ask. Yeah, or Ryan and I are big fans of saying, or as you saw Ryan do in the beginning, our birth year, because it doesn't change, so it is something that's really part of our identity. Like I can really own, 86, Challenger, happened. That was a big part of my mom's pregnancy with me. Like what happened 86? I mean, that was coming of age. As a teenager, right when 9/11 happened, I was entering the workforce during the Great Recession. Like knowing I was born in 86 tells you a lot about my life experience and who I am. And I can identify with that much more than the 36 I currently happen to be, or the millennial that I'm labeled as. That's a great one. All right, these are awesome. Okay, so we are going to do one more breakout room. It's going to be there's going to be 5 of you in it now. And what I want you to do while they get the breakout room set up is just take a minute and look at these things and find some things you want to choose to commit to stop, start, and keep doing. And if you have that commitment form downloaded, fill it in. But what I want you to do is when we commit to doing something, it's better when we're held accountable. So you're going to go to your breakout rooms, go around in a circle. This time, start with the person who has the shortest hair, and then go to the person who has the longest hair, and just share out one thing that you're going to commit to keeping doing, stopping doing, or starting doing, and just speak it out to the room. And then we will come back, have a little break, and do Q&A. If someone has no hair, then they get to go first. That is the shortest. All right, whenever y'all are ready, go ahead and open the breakout rooms. Yeah, we can adjust Julie's. That comes up all the time. Like there is cultural context, especially with like the sweetie, like, yeah, obviously if it's.
Should I go to the breakout room?
There's 5 in them now, so I don't know if you need to.
I like being the participant though.
What room are you in, Ryan?
10.
Well, go then.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, yeah, I didn't have somebody with me, or I did, but they weren't speaking.
They weren't there.
Okay, I'll reassign you now. One moment. What room were you in, please?
I found her. I can reassign her.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. It is kind of, they're not alphabetical, so it's hard to find people.
And Kyrié, how long should we have these groups for?
Yeah, at 11:24 or 2:24, let's send we're going to close you up now because they should just be saying, like one quick thing.
Okay. Tiffany, thanks for managing all this.
Yep, no problem. 2:24, I'll send out the 1-minute warning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, looks like all the rooms have people who are actually there, and at least one. Good. That's always the challenge in a room with people. You can just say, okay, pair up. That they're all real people that can pair.
Right. Because all of the rooms had people in them. They just weren't speaking.
Yeah.
I know some folks are like doing other things maybe too. I've gotten a couple private chats, like they're here, but they have to go to a different meeting. So I think there's a little of that. This really is a great chat. Just so many awesome ideas and participation. People have a lot of things to say about age and ageism. It's always interesting.
Mm-hmm. What's cool, I always love to like being with people who are thinking a lot about aging already. And so it's like such an interesting twist on it too for folks who like obviously here we're all thinking about creative aging. So it's not, because sometimes that's almost the awareness too, if it's not in an aging group. First you have to like make people aware of the fact that we're aging. That even is a thing. And then it's always nice when we can kind of start at a level of understanding. Yeah, the chat's really thoughtful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tiffany. So we'll wrap it up when they all come back here, and then we'll take a 5-minute break whenever that ends up being. All right. Thanks everyone for sharing your commitments with your breakout rooms. I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan with one more ask for you.
Thanks so much, everyone. So if you are so inclined, we would love for you to share your commitments on social media. I have mine right here. I have it hanging on my wall. It's just a really simple way to sort of spread the message about what you learned here today and what you hope to do with what you learned, or maybe what you already knew. So we would love for you to do that, and then you can also hashtag Let's Dismantle Ageism. Yes, we will. I'll put office hours. The checklist that you're referring to is maybe the worksheet, so I'll put both of those in the chat right now.
Great. And while Ryan does that, yeah, we just want to say a big thank you so much for this. We're going to kind of close up the workshop part and open up the Q&A. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. And during that, I encourage you to send your questions. You can put them in the chat, or if you want to ask them anonymously, you can send them to Susan, and then she'll sort of moderate. I know stuff's been coming in through the chat all along, and really excited for this discussion just based on what we've already been seeing in the chat. So feel free to take 5 minutes and a bit of a bio break, and then come back at, that'd be 31 after the hour, and we'll start a Q&A. Thank you so much for your attention, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, 32 after the hour. So Susan's been sending us some of your queries. Feel free to continue to send them to her or to put them in the chat. The first one that she sent me, which is also, as you all know now, one of my favorites, the crone archetype. So one thing I will say is if anyone has any resources that they love on the crone archetype, please share them in the chat for myself and other folks. As I said, I call myself a crone in training. I think it's really important, the same way we look forward to future life phases. When we're younger, we look forward to being an adult. When we're a kid, it's important to train to become the elders that we want to be. And I find the crone archetype really important, and there are not a ton of great examples or roadmaps for how, particularly as those of us who identify as women, to be older, other than to just be like the sweet granny in the corner. So love talking about that. One resource that I want to point you all to is a new book that just came out called Hagitude, so like the attitude of the hag, by mythologist and psychologist Sharon Blackie. She also wrote If Women Rose Rooted, if you're familiar with it. This is like the book I thought I was going to have to write when I got to my crondom, and I'm so excited that it exists now to like read and build upon. It goes really through it's really geared towards postmenopausal women and that part of our psychological development. And she even goes through a bunch of different archetypes for older women, like the creatrix, like the more trickster energy. There's online courses. She has a great podcast. This is such a great podcast. Yeah, and she's awesome. So I am just over the moon that Hagitude exists and is a really great repository. In the book too, she talks a lot about different stories from indigenous traditions. Mostly she's in the Celtic world, so mostly from that world, different stories of older women that we can sort of get roadmaps for what's possible there, as well as a lot of great fiction. She mentions a lot of novels and stuff too, because it's so much easier for us to imagine our own older age when we have roadmaps from the fiction world. Anything else anyone wants to add, or more specific question about the crone?
Yeah,
perfect. Yeah.
Stephen. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Stephen Jenkinson's awesome. Well, then Ryan, do you want to take the second query that Susan had sent us, which was about intersectionality?
Sure. Yeah. So we touched on it very briefly at the beginning because it's really impossible to do this work without mentioning intersectionality. It's complicated because I feel like in a lot of ways age is just entering some of the dialogue around intersectionality. But it's so important when we are talking about aging in any context to think about who actually has the privilege to grow old, because there are lower life expectancies based on socioeconomic status, based on racial discrimination. There's a lot of reasons why why there isn't longevity equity you might say. And so, you know, that's one point of it. Another point is that when we do experience ageism, it's not separate from all of our other parts of our identity. So when we talk about something like ageism, we're not saying that, you know, other parts of people's identity doesn't matter. It's definitely something that's so important to look at holistically instead of looking at ageism in a vacuum. It's important to consider, you know, what are the cultural contexts of ageism? How is it wrapped up with white supremacy, and sizeism, and classism, and all of these other isms, and how do they relate? Kyrié and I actually, over the pandemic, created a course for the Eden Alternative, which maybe Kyrié can get the link for that. And that was that experience of making that course was really exciting, because we did get to dive deep and think about, you know, what is how does ageism fit into this broader context of intersectionality? And how is it more, you know, we are more than the sum of our parts, which is the subtitle. So that, you know, we would love to create a workshop similar to this one, that really dives deep into how ageism intersects with race and gender and socioeconomic status and all the other parts of our identity. But for now, we can offer this online course. It's free. We made sure of that. Do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, sure, will do. So the next question was about terms of endearment and terms of respect, sir, ma'am, sweetie, honey, and just sort of what do we do when those terms are culturally appropriate or used? And so this actually comes up a lot with that. And I think this is where, you know, things need to be nuanced. There are no black and whites, right? This is all gray too. And so it is really important to know the culture you're in, to know the context you're in, to know not only what the intent of what you're saying is, but what the impact is going to be. So of course, none of these are hard and fast rules. I grew up, you know, in the South, in a very Southern family, was definitely taught to say sir, ma'am, as forms of respect. And for folks for whom that feels respectful to be called that, then we want to use those forms of address. And for folks who that doesn't feel respectful, we want to honor that and then modify what we call them. And so same thing with, you know, again, in the South, honey and sweetie, much more common. And when that is culturally normative and feels good and is connecting, you want to use it. One of my mentors, Bill Thomas, always talks about, you know, you don't want to use a term of endearment before you've earned it. So it's really, what are we doing? Are we using honey or sweetie to shortcut forming a relationship? So a lot of times, you know, I worked in long-term care. And that would happen sometimes, like, absolutely, like long-term care is a very broken system with a lot of amazing people that could be doing much easier minimum wage jobs working in it. So zero judgment there. One of the problems can be when you don't have enough time and enough staff, things need to happen faster, move faster than the speed of relationship. And if we're using terms of endearment to shortcut relationship, that's never good. So again, this really is a nuanced conversation. So I was happy to hear one of the breakout rooms got into it, because it's not never say sweetie, it's only call your sweetie sweetie. It's not never say ma'am, you know, it's only say ma'am to someone who's going to receive that as a term of respect. We could go down a big rabbit hole with like the word elder too in different cultural contexts. Like really important to have these conversations though, because that is raising our consciousness, which is the whole point. And I think the next one was the DEIJ one, right, Ryan? Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so just in the same way that ageism and aging is just sort of starting to enter the conversation about intersectionality. It's just, we're just starting to realize, people are just starting to realize that it needs to also enter our workplaces too. It's so important. There's the you know, the act to basically stop discrimination against people 40 and older when it comes to the workplace, but it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't include people who are being interviewed. It only affects employees, and it's really hard to actually prove it's pretty strict as far as proving that you've been discriminated against as far as age goes. So that being said, thank you so much for the question about adding it to the diversity, equity, inclusion, justice statement. I do have a resource here, which I'll put into the chat, that is that might be helpful with just language, like in hold on, where did it go? In writing something like that, or really writing about aging at all. And then, you know, there's also, let me see, there's also this article by Sheila Callahan, who we helped to start an organization called Age Equity Alliance, and I'll put the link for that too. And Age Equity Alliance is really all about this exact topic. How do we add ageism into this conversation about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice?
I put AEA in there.
Okay, great, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm trying to just keep up with the chat here. Yeah, so thank you for putting Ashton was interviewed by Kimberly Crenshaw. So if you want to think about ageism and intersectionality, that's a great one. And yes, Ashton is the wordsmith amongst us. Age Against the Machine is very witty title there. I'm trying to see, and then I forgive me for pronouncing your name if I get it wrong, but is it Airman King says another intersectional dimension is marital and partnership status. And yeah, then it talks about Deary and Sweetie as a way of addressing a single individual seems to be associated only with being a growing adult if one is married or partnered. Yeah. And there's a lot of people too talking about what is it like to age into elderhood without children. There's a whole movement around that. And also, yeah, like partnership status really does intersect in interesting ways with both our ideas of people should be, you know, should they be partnered when they're older or not too. There's a lot of really interesting work around the word widow even is super interesting because there's no, like for widowhood, it's very, let's see, so you can be widowed, I'm trying to remember now, but it's like, it's very gendered in the way we use the term widow and interesting there too. But when you actually look at the research on outcomes based on gender and widowhood, anyways, I'm digressing there, but fascinating. Yeah, what else? Looks like we have Alan, you have a question? See a raised hand.
Yes, thank you. First of all, this is a great workshop. I'm really enjoying it. I'm curious your reactions, anybody in this group, to communication differences, especially when you think of which side of the digital divide you're on. You know, with AI, with the invasive cameras all over the place. We talked about it in our group for a short time. Do you find that a more elderly group, let's put 60 plus as our digital divide time, do you find they're responding differently than the younger group? And is that causing communication issues that might have implications for many years to come, especially now coming out of COVID and we're having more of these virtual interactions with each other than ever before?
James,
that's my question.
Do you have to answer that question, or you?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask. Can you guys hear me? I can't hear myself. Okay. All right. Alan, what is it we're on one side of and the other side? Could you clarify that for me?
Yes, like for instance, if you're working with older people, sometimes, especially trying to get them to be involved in more programs, especially virtual programs, you have to encourage them to know how to use the technology better. Otherwise, they can't access as well. Or are our communications changing? You know, the way that we are so used to using a telephone. I love the telephone the best because, you know, you're not dealing with being visually seen all the time. Dealing with an ATM machines and all the other things that are involved with being able to get along in our society. Obviously, older people may have more difficulties and challenges than my 25-year-old son, who is so far beyond what I can do in such and to be able to utilize the technology in a very more effective way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the big 4 or 5 really need to grasp that, and that, like, that's an area of empowerment, and an area where they need to look at that as probably the only way to get to for them to do that is to think of it as a demographic in their marketplace. And it's a huge demographic, like if you go into the Apple store, and I count myself in this too, and I see someone that's close to my age but has not kept up with it, it's a big curve. And maybe that has to do with us. When we're creating a platform or reaching out, we make it as easy as possible to link into whatever we want someone to take action on. But I think it's a really good question. It's very thorny and huge.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I think it's twofold too, because I think there's also, an assumption that older people can't learn new technology. So we limit how we engage with them under this assumption. So I think either way is bad. I think you really need a balance when it comes to this. And it's also helpful to just know that, this has been happening since the Ice Age, since literally, technology has been has been carried on by the youth since the Ice Age. I listened to this podcast recently about how basically what happens is the youth get to decide what they carry on into the next generations, because they're living longer, and because they they get all this technology that's passed down to them from older people, and they get to decide what they pass down to future generations. So I think just being realistic about how this knowledge transfer happens, especially when it comes to technology, because it can get so frustrating when so much of our world is run by technology. But I don't, I think as a young person, I benefit even more, like I benefit just as much as an older person does from really simple technology, because I don't want to deal with, I want to be offline just as much as older people want to be offline. I don't think it has to do with age so much as just not letting technology overtake us. I'll put the podcast in the link.
May I chime in with a follow-up thought? Related to digital technology, I think this is a really important example of the intersectional considerations about equity and age. Many folks in rural communities don't have the technology because the actual infrastructure for the bandwidth is not there. Many people who don't have a lot of socioeconomic money don't necessarily have access to the devices. So we have a lot of different ways that question about digital divide happens, and age could be one of them, but there are other ways too. And when you think about an older adult who might be of lower socioeconomic means in a rural place, you've got 3 potential ways that they're not being served. And it, least of all, might have to do with the fact that they're an older adult. So thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I was going to say too that if you Google digital divide, it's usually used to speak to this socioeconomic gap and lack of access to the internet based on socioeconomic status. And there's some amazing orgs trying to help dismantle that. And I also think it's great when the world gives us a little bit of a litmus test for this. So I think the stereotype of, again, I've done a lot of work with like nursing homes. Oh, people in nursing homes can't join Zoom. They wouldn't know how to do that before 2020. Hey, guess what? Once given access to tablets and given access to the internet and doing it once or twice, I'm regularly on Zooms with, people who live and work in nursing homes where that was told for years as a barrier of like, oh, we can't move that stuff online because like they can't do that, So I think that's really important to sort of name in this conversation too, is that a lot of times we assume something is impossible and then it's interesting to see what is possible when circumstances actually place those constraints on us. Yeah, and so that's really interesting. I also think, sort of to Ryan's point, again, one of my mentors is Bill Thomas, and he talks a lot about design, and that, you know, we can see those who are, you know, the frailest among us, like the people who are the least technologically savvy among us should be our like design gurus when it comes to tech. They should be who we're designing for, and we can actually use that to create technology that's really helpful for all of us. So a more low-tech version of this is the curb cut. Sure, curb cuts got put into place. If you don't know what a curb cut is, it's, you know, when you're at the sidewalk, instead of there being the gap into the gutter, there's the nice little slope. Those got into place thanks to a lot of work done by disability justice advocates. But tell you what, I really like the curb cut right now when I'm pushing my baby in her stroller. I've enjoyed it when I've used a rolling suitcase. I've enjoyed it, you know, just to not trip. I'm a bit clumsy off of the edge of the curb. Curb cuts are helpful for all. And so I just think this is more of a question of getting more creative in our design and truly making beautiful, inclusive design than pitting groups of people and making it the problem of the product, not the problem of the person. Okay, soapbox over.
I wonder if we can go to, I forget who it was, but someone was mentioning sex.
Kick it off, Ryan. Who doesn't want to talk about sex?
I mean, I love this question. I think it's, you know, I think it's an area for you know, for liberation. I think for all of us, there's an assumption, you know, I think, Kyrié, you say sometimes that you had a friend who literally thought that you can't orgasm after a certain age. Was that true? So I think
yeah, thought that you couldn't orgasm after menopause, that was one of the changes that happened. Like, oh, you can still come after menopause?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of misconceptions. And I love this area too, because I feel like it's a fun place to dispel these misconceptions. And there's a website that I can look for, I think based out of Europe, that really tackles this idea of what it means to be an older person, an older woman, and to be aging. I think it's a really exciting area with a lot to unpack. So it's definitely, thank you for bringing that up. And, you know, I think, yeah, I don't know. I could go on and on about this question, but the orgasm, that's great. Yeah, I think, I don't know. I feel like we could have another workshop just like this one about the intersection of sort of sex negativity and ageism. I think there's also, you know, this assumption that, you know, that there's no sex happening in assisted living facilities and amongst older people, and there's tons of STIs amongst this population because they don't have access to safer sex supplies in these institutions. And then I also think, you know, on the flip side, with sort of sex positive culture, there's a lack of representation of older people. So I think it's definitely an exciting area. I'm gonna read what Galia says in the chat. So my grandmother told me I should wear sexier clothing and show more cleavage while wearing fishnets and a very sexy velvet dress to my cousin's bat mitzvah. It was awesome. She has always been my fashion icon and has always been open with me about sex. She tells me all about the hookup gossip at her nursing home too. That's great. Fantastic. Do you have anything else to add about that, Kyrié? I'll look for the link.
I was glad you brought up the STIs because I wanted to name too, like this is actually like a public health crisis because there are so many STIs in long-term care communities. And I think if you look at the last time I checked, at least if you look at the nation, the highest STI rate is the Villages, Florida. But it's, you know, which is the problem is I think, and it's because we're not talking about it. And it really is a problem when people don't have access to safe sex tools or to medication, you know, to take care of infections. So I think that that's a really important, you know, fact to share. But I also just think, yeah, there's lots I like people bringing it up. I'm thinking of a couple of things I'm thinking of is there's a podcast called the opennesters.com I'll put in, which this is a woman who comes to our office hours a lot, Tessa Crone, great last name. And she talks to, this is parent specific to parents whose kids have left the nest and they're exploring opening the relationship or just like talking about sex more too. So she talks a lot about that. And then another place I'll turn you all on to is Stella Fossey, who comes to office hours a lot too. And she is actually starting Crone Culture Hub, which is going to be a bunch of resources more in that Crone land, but she also does like erotic writing, which I think is a great way too. Again, if we have artistic representations of older people having sex, whether that's in films, in books, in paintings, it's a really helpful for us to be able to conceptualize that for ourselves. I'm curious about this group. We have a lot of, anyone have anything to add to the conversation about where does ageism get in the way when it comes to sex at all ages?
I'll jump in. I don't exactly know what I'm going to say. I don't have it planned out, but I think about this quite a bit, right? Like I'm older, I've always had dry skin. My skin's even drier now, and like, do I, am I still attractive? And that, I mean, I think a lot of people go through that. And one of the things, but I think what younger men don't understand is that as you get older, it gets better because you become a more sensitive, thoughtful, kind of crafty, I don't know, whatever, skillful, erotically, and that's a wonderful thing. And so it's very frustrating to see that it's like occasionally you'll have somebody like, oh, you're foxy or whatever, you're a silver fox or something like that, but that's very occasional. It's more like a turnoff. And it also happens that I'm being friendly because in the context of what I do and my performing life, I'm being welcoming to a guest, and they take that as I'm being lecherous or a dirty old man. And I'm very specific about how I approach people. So I know that I'm really trying to limit that. I'm always willing to grow, but it's kind of shocking. It's like, okay, suddenly you see me as different, even though I know internally I have all this, experience. That's my ramble.
Thanks, James. Yeah, you can see how, again, like all of the negative perceptions of, like you have to you're either like a silver fox or a pedophile, like, and those are the two options for an older man to have, a sexual identity. Like that doesn't feel right at all, right? That's that ageism there too, of coming in with those biases and stereotypes. And I think, and I haven't gotten to live it yet, but I know from, friend sharing and literature and stuff too, like the reflection you shared too of sex getting better with age has been shared by a lot of people as we know our bodies better, as we do learn to like slow down, as we learn to ask for what we want, we learn to know what we want. Yeah, it gets better.
Yeah. And yes, Susan, exactly. I mean, I've been in that same, that same situation. Not presently, but I was like, oh, I can't be 58. I have to be 52. And before that, it was I can't be 40. I need to be 36.
And then you can also choose the dates of the ages, the birth years of the people who you are actually exposed to. So that's a whole other set of, well, I want to choose, this range of people from, this arbitrary age to this arbitrary age. And then if people are lying about it, then it sort of throws that idea out the window. But yeah, dating apps are definitely a place where ageism shows up in all sorts of ways.
Someone has to run, but they're wondering if there'll be a recording later. Susan, can you let folks know where to find this later?
Sure, we'll be recording and uploading to our YouTube channel, which is free for everyone to see, and you'll get more information after the Creative Aging Institute wraps up next week.
And then just as a reminder, if folks came in late too, our entire workshop is available as a DIY workshop kit. So the script, the deck, a recording of us doing it that you can go through self-paced is all there. I'm going to put that in the chat again too, because we really do encourage you. Like I said, we're really super duper open source. Take it, iterate on it. Let us know, just because that's fun for us to know. And then, you know, we can do the sharing on the social things if you're into that. But we really, you know, made this because we heard people felt like that was impeding them, of like, oh, I want to talk about this stuff, but I don't know how to start. And so that's why we created this workshop too.
Thank you all so much. This was great.
Yeah, any other questions?
I have a question sort of generally for Kyrié and Ryan. In your work, as you're doing this with many different groups, what are some of the things that you hear over and over again about people's concerns or vulnerabilities or desires to make good change in this space?
Really good question. I guess I'll start. Right? Do you have anything? Go, Ryan, if you have something.
No, you go.
The first thing that what we hear over and over again is just that people want to be able to talk about this with others, and there just aren't spaces where they feel comfortable bringing this up and so I feel like that's usually the feedback we get after workshops. Overwhelmingly was like, oh, it was so nice to talk about this. Like, I've never actually, I don't know how to bring it up in conversation, that it isn't easy to be in conversation around, and it isn't easy to find affinity partners who, you know, have a level of understanding about ageism and want to talk about how it's impacting themselves and their community. So I feel like that's the biggest need I'm hearing, is just for connection with others who are thinking about these things and a collective action in that way. Ryan, what's coming up for you?
I think for me, and this is honestly what I love hearing, is people just say, oh, I have to think about this, you know, like I really have to dig into this deeper. Because, you know, a workshop like this one that we just gave is just really scratching the surface, because like basically each topic that we touched on, you could spend an hour and a half, another hour and a half, you know, learning about each topic. And it really just, you know, keeps on getting more and more complicated. The longer I've been doing this work, I've definitely come up with way more questions than I have answers. But that being said, I think we are coming up with answers, but it's something that we really do have to do together. Because the thing is that there's as many ways to age as there are people aging. So it's literally something that we'll never be able to make any perfect formula to figure out. It's really it's a really complicated, sticky process, and I that's what keeps me coming back to it.
In the chat, I like your term, James, chronodiversity.
Amazing. It's a very creative group. I can tell where you are all, what field you're all in. This is great.
Yeah. And I think it also, I want to say too, and a lot of times shame kind of comes up, and I want to name too, like, this is such a evolving process. Like, even as Ryan and I have been doing this work, like, I feel like what's most currently on the like conversation docket is thinking about the generational labeling, and how that's really not helpful, as we sort of touched on in the workshop. But that's something we've been exploring a lot recently. And that's something where I can go back and look at blogs and things I wrote where I said, like, you know, multi-generational. And now we're wondering, like, oh, it should really be mixed age, because generations really only exist within, you know, families. And when we use generational labelings like boomer, millennial, or Gen Z, it really only serves to divide us, not to connect us and to like pigeonhole us. And so I just sort of want to say that too, because I feel like this work is so emerging and evolving, and it's about having conversations and like leveling up our understanding, and then choosing to let go of what doesn't serve us and pick up what does too.
Oh, Julie, great. Yeah, give us a minute. Julie is asking for resources to assess facilities or programs for ageism. If we have any to share. I will say one thing we really wish exists and want to help advocate for existing is an assessment tool for resources on like how effective are resources at ageism, but there are some really great surveys and stuff out there where you can check for ageism. Ryan, you look like you're looking. Are you looking stuff up? Trying. Okay. We will get some stuff to you in the chat. Off the top of my head too, out of Harvard, they have their implicit bias tests, and they have one for age. So that's a really great way for folks to just get a sense of their own implicit age bias. That was that bias we were talking about that's unconscious and unintentional. And so that's a great way for people to see. I use that a lot in teaching too, for people to check their own. But then there are also some just questionnaires and surveys to assess your own ageism.
Yeah, at Old School, we're not that wild about AARP, but they do have a benchmark, a workforce benchmarking tool that they created with the Center on Aging and Work at Boston College. So I'll put a link to that in the chat. It's definitely not perfect, but it's along the lines of what you're asking for. But it's definitely needed. You know, we need more resources like this one. Last year, the World Health Organization came out with the global report on ageism. And when I read it, you know, basically every other paragraph, it said, there needs to be more research, you know, there needs to be more work in this area. It's really an area that's needing attention. And I think that attention is definitely happening. It's just a bit slow. Thank you, Galia, for putting that in there. It's a fascinating read if you're into that kind of stuff. Oh, Tina, I love your question. Thank you so much. So can you speak to how we might start to have the conversation with children? Can you tell that Kyrié and I run a clearinghouse of anti-ageism resources? We do have resources on this, and maybe Kyrié can put some in the chat. Well, I just say that I'm reading an incredible book right now called Trust Kids. And it's all about ageism against younger people. And I think, you know, when we're talking about ageism with young kids, I think it's vitally important to talk about how they see older people, how they interact with older people, and how it's important to uplift everyone of all ages with younger people. But then I also think it's really important to really evaluate how we're treating them. You know, whether it's with respect or whether it's with, you know, some sort of authoritarian standing. I know that I was raised that way. I think maybe a lot of us were raised that way, but I think it's time, you know, if we're talking about liberating people of all ages, that definitely includes children. Kyrié, do you have any thoughts? I'll put the link to Trust.
Yeah, I think so. It's both, right? So it's like making sure, so working with kids to make sure age bias doesn't form. You know, we know those ideas start around 4 or 5, the same time that biases around other identity factors start. So definitely working on that too. And then I encourage you, if you just go to Old School and in the chat or in the search, you type in children, you're going to get a lot of stuff, but I'm putting some stuff in here too. Like here's like a blog about children being people. And then I put A's for aging, which are just age positive children books. Yeah, and Susan, exactly. The Disney slides are quite striking. So I think it's also about finding age positive representation. So like even and things are starting to get a little bit better, I will say, like even in Disney, I was excited to see that in their new Beauty and the Beast, they leaned a little bit more into the enchantress there, really is embodying that, again, back to the crone archetype, where you can fold between the enchantress and the hag too. And I thought that they did a good job of showing that. But yeah, I think it's really important both to recognize ageism works both ways and to find stuff. And I know there's some folks right now working on emerging like a curriculum for children. This is definitely a topic that is brewing and coming up. Let's see, I just wanted to say, how did I...
Cheryl's question is the one that we probably get most often. I guess we can probably put a link to a podcast in there, the Big Middle podcast, where we dive into it a bit more. I didn't spend enough time with my grandparents personally. So I think that was part of like the benevolent ageism that got me into doing gerontology. And I think the reason why I didn't spend enough time with my grandparents is because I was growing up in a youth-centric world. So yeah, I got into this work because I was affected by it, even as a young person.
Yeah, and sort of same. I think I started to realize just the impact of the stereotypes I held, and then sort of it's held my interest. I feel like it's more of a thing where you can't really help what holds your interest, but like once I got exposed to it, it's just something that I can't quite let go of. And I think we've both done a lot of exploration of like, why do we really care so much? And trying to look and make sense of our own stories. You know, as I sort of mentioned in my intro, I was really sick as a kid. And so my abilities and my age didn't match up in the reverse that happens for most older people, where people assumed I was able to do things because of my age that I wasn't because of illness. And so I think I kind of got that reverse feeling there, which definitely helped build up some empathy for the experience that I'm sure has factored in a, again, implicit, unconscious way. But yeah, so I think it's always interesting to get that question too. And then Susan asks, now that you've all experienced this training, what is the next level of exploration that you can do? Does Old School offer an even deeper dive? So I would say to that, yes. Ashton created a conscious raising guide about ageism specifically. And then we have since, in collaboration with other colleagues, created ones about the intersection of ageism and sexism and ageism and racism. And we'll put those in there. And those, you could even start your own consciousness raising group, like those that catalyze the women's movement. There's also just a bunch of really great reflection questions in the back for you to reflect on your own. There's a ton of campaigns fighting ageism, both at the city, state, local level that you can get involved in. As I said, if you are wanting to make any kind of a resource, we definitely have a gap when it comes to more artistically focused resources. So we would love to do a call out for those. I'm going to work on getting links to those consciousness raising guides. Ryan, anything you can think of for the deeper dive?
Oh, I was already on getting the links.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, definitely office hours. I think first and foremost, probably the best thing that you could do is tell someone about what you learned here today. And we're not, I mean, you don't have to attach our names to it, you know, you don't have to say, you know, that it was Old School that gave this presentation, but talk about what you learned, you know, like strike up the conversation with someone, because I really think that, like, I'm so grateful that you were all here and were able to be here for this whole presentation, but I don't think it necessarily takes a giant presentation like this one to explore this stuff. You know, I really believe that there's ways that we can impact those around us. I think this topic does have so much to do with mental health. I think I deeply believe that the more that people undo internalized ageism against themselves and against other people, it will better our mental health all around. So I really encourage folks to just apply this to your daily life as much as possible.
Perfect. Yeah, I want to say, someone just asked me if I'm a quilter. I'm a big mender. I did not make this quilt, but I do want to say I love, I don't know if any of you have read the book Craftivism. That's all about like activism and crafts and these like quiet ways. It's really like activism for introverts. But I will say one of my favorite anti-ageist craftivisms is mending, visible mending on clothes. Because I think if we can continue to use clothes we've had and we can modify them and mend them, but in ways where it's visible that we've done so, it's a really analogous for the way that we can be with our body as it moves through life and shows its wear and tear and gets mended in certain ways too. So just wanted to answer that question. Also give a shout out to visible mending and fiber arts as beautiful analogies for our own physical aging process. And we really hope to see you all at office hours. That's really the best next step is just come hang out with us. We know you're available because it's happening right now. Come hang out with us on Wednesdays. Ask us anything. Thank you so much for your time and your attention today and being with us in this. And I really look forward to connecting with you all.
And I just put the links to the consciousness raising guides in the chat. And we also have it translated into Spanish. So I put that there too. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ryan and Kyrié. Thank you so much. This was awesome. One thing before we wrap it up for intermission is just to invite everyone here. If you're not already in touch with and connected to the State Arts Agency in your state, please reach out and please let the folks there know who would love to hear from you, that you support arts for older adults, that you encourage your State Arts Agency to invest as much as they can in supporting older adults in the arts, that you want to see more of it, that you know that they have a role to play, and just encourage them and advocate for what they can do in your state and your communities to make sure that we're making all of our institutions as anti-ageist as we can, and that includes the arts. Kyrié and Ryan, seriously, it was such a soulful conversation, and I feel like the best kind of learning happens when we feel connected, and that's a hard thing to do in Zoom space. And I, for one, feel really connected to you all and to everyone here. So thank you also to everyone who joined this session for just bringing your full self to it. We are a learning community and will keep being one for a long time to come. So we are going to take an intermission now after that incredible session. Thank you again, and we'll see everybody at 3:40 Eastern. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Take good care.